My name is Jonathan. I'm 38 years old, and 3 months ago, I walked into a boardroom. I thought I had earned a lifetime seat in, only to be blindsided by silence, cold stares, and a legal envelope that ended everything. I co-founded Sterling and Company nearly a decade ago. We were just 5 people back then, hungry and reckless, pitching to empty chairs in rented co-working spaces. I was the rainmaker, the strategist, the relationship builder, the fixer. I didn't just bring in clients, I brought in belief. And for a while, that was enough. We rose fast, built sleek offices, wore tailored suits, flew business class, and spoke on panels we once paid to attend. But success has a scent, and power, it has a half-life. I didn't see the decay beneath the polish. The firing wasn't just a termination, it was a surgical removal. No prior warning, no HR meeting, no quiet coffee or things aren't working out talk. Just a pre-scheduled 9 a.m. board meeting where my access badge stopped working the moment I sat down. A junior security officer, someone I once hired as an intern, stood by the door like I was a threat. A legal rep I'd never met slid a stack of papers across the table. The CEO, Malcolm Trent, didn't even make eye contact. He let the silence deliver the sentence. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required. That was it. No explanation, no severance, not even a thank you. I looked around the room and saw the faces of people I once mentored. People whose weddings I attended. People whose careers I helped shape. And all I could read in their eyes was cowardice. No guilt, no remorse. Just the quiet relief of those who get to keep their seats by staying silent. I left with nothing but my car keys and a gut full of betrayal. The office lobby, once a monument to everything I helped build, now felt like foreign ground. As I walked out, a new receptionist didn't even recognize me. In the days that followed, I disappeared. I didn't rant online. I didn't lawyer up. I didn't even talk to my family. I went off-grid, retreating to a small rental by the coast with nothing but my laptop, a burner phone, and a spiral-bound notebook full of names, clients, contacts, secrets. They thought I'd crawl away, broken and irrelevant. What they didn't know was that while they were celebrating my erasure from the firm's history, I was already working on something they would never see coming. I wasn't retreating. I was recalibrating. They say revenge is best served cold, but mine was clinical, calculated, and silent. From the moment I disappeared, I began designing a new identity. Not just legally, I changed my tone, my language, my appearance. I became someone forgettable, deliberately dull. Under the name David Marlowe, I registered a shell consultancy in the Cayman Islands with a front office in London and a fictitious executive team scattered across LinkedIn. But the real engine of the operation was me, still burning with the fury of betrayal, now channeled into precision. The first step was choosing the right clients to steal, not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the most strategically embedded. These were the cornerstone accounts I had personally courted for years, clients who had trusted me with their business, their visions, their vulnerabilities. I knew their birthdays, their children's names, their unspoken doubts about Sterling and Company. I started with a subtle message, an encrypted email to a single CFO I once had a whiskey-soaked heart-to-heart with in Tokyo. I didn't mention the firm. I didn't mention the firing. I simply offered insight into a market shift no one had seen coming and told him I could help. Within a week, I was on a video call under dim lighting and a different voice cadence. By the end of the month, I had resecured $6.3 million in accounts on retainer. Word spread, but not loudly. Just whispers in the right ears. There's this new boutique firm, Real Insight, which feels like old-school Sterling. The irony was delicious. Every call, every pitch, every transition. I made it seamless. Because the experience was familiar. It was me all along. One client asked if I knew Jonathan. I smiled through the screen and said he was sharp, ahead of his time. As Sterling and Company began to feel the tremors, clients withdrawing unexpectedly, long-standing accounts going dark, the board panicked. They launched internal audits. Mid-level executives were called in for interrogations. They started firing people. But there was no trail, no signature, no proof, just a slow, bleeding decline they couldn't stop or trace. Meanwhile, I operated out of a rented room above a dusty bookstore, fueled by espresso and spite. My network expanded. My team, an anonymous circle of freelance analysts, digital ghostwriters, and an ex-cybersecurity specialist, handled logistics. I didn't need office space. I needed leverage. And I had it. Each client lost wasn't just revenue. It was a statement. You built this on my back, and now I'm taking it apart, piece by piece. But just as I was preparing my next wave, something unexpected arrived. An encrypted email with no sender ID and a single attachment, internal use only. I opened it, and what I read turned my private war into something much, much bigger. I had spent weeks planning my next move, targeting high-net-worth clients in luxury goods and mergers, making sure Sterling and Company's losses were escalating with each day. It felt like I was finally in control. Every new deal was a step closer to breaking them. But then, just as I was starting to savor the fruits of my revenge, an email arrived that would change everything. The subject line was cryptic, confidential, internal use only. No name, no sender. Just a link that I almost hesitated to click on. For a moment, I thought about deleting it. I didn't need to complicate things. But curiosity, that relentless shadow, pushed me forward. I clicked. The document that opened before me was a bombshell. It was an internal memo from Sterling and Company's financial department, outlining a secret embezzlement operation that stretched back for years. The memo was littered with encrypted numbers, names, and dates, but there was one consistent pattern: millions of dollars funneled into a series of off-the-book accounts. Accounts that, to my surprise, had been signed off by none other than the board members who had fired me. The file didn't just point to financial misconduct. It detailed a highly sophisticated cover-up to conceal the theft, and it suggested that my sudden dismissal was not random. It was a coordinated move designed to shield the company from public scrutiny when the truth inevitably surfaced. My termination was never about performance. It was about silencing me before I discovered the fraud they were running. The sting of betrayal hit harder than I expected. I wasn't just the victim of corporate politics or an opportunistic takeover. I had been sacrificed to protect a much larger secret. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was personal. The memo ended with a chilling note. "We know what you've built. We need your help to bring it down." The words haunted me for days. Someone inside Sterling and Company knew what had happened. Someone wanted me to be part of the reckoning. But who? And more importantly, why me? At first, I considered ignoring the email. After all, the game I had been playing was a simple one. Take clients, watch the firm implode, then disappear into the ether. But now, the stakes had changed. This was no longer a petty revenge scheme. This was about corruption, manipulation, and the truth being buried under a mountain of lies. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, trying to connect the dots. Who would want me involved? Who had sent this file? And why did they think I could help bring down an empire built on deception? Could I trust whoever was behind this? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This was an opportunity, not just to destroy them, but to expose everything. To take back control and, in the process, bring down the very institution that had once been my life's work. But trust was a fragile thing. If I was going to play this game, I had to be smarter. I couldn't afford to be reckless, not anymore. And so, with the file still open in front of me, I began making plans. The wheels of the heist I had been orchestrating were about to shift into overdrive. The email had been clear, but the silence that followed was deafening. I sat on the edge of my chair, the glowing screen in front of me offering no immediate answers, just a sea of uncertainty. The file I had uncovered was damning, a smoking gun in an already escalating war. But what I didn't know was who had fired the shot. I needed answers, and I needed them quickly. Over the next few days, I scoured every detail of the memo, cross-referencing the names mentioned, tracking the accounts and money flows. I discovered patterns: purchasing records, shady offshore companies, suspicious transfers hidden behind layers of shell corporations. It was clear that something deeply entrenched was rotting at the heart of Sterling and Company. But as I dug deeper, something strange happened. Another email came through, this one without an attachment. The message was simple, but its implications were far from it. "You're not the only one watching." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Whoever had sent the file wanted me to know that I wasn't working alone, whether I liked it or not. My first instinct was to brush it off, to assume it was a hacker or another corporate spy. But I knew better. This wasn't a random message. This was someone sending me a signal. The question was, who? Days passed in quiet tension, the pressure mounting as I continued pulling at the threads of Sterling's empire. And then, on the third day, I received another encrypted message. This time, it contained a meeting time and a location, a nondescript cafe in the financial district. No name, no explanation, but the message was clear. Someone inside Sterling and Company was reaching out. I arrived early, my eyes scanning the room for any signs of recognition, any hint that the person I was meeting could be trusted. I kept my head low, my face shadowed under the brim of my hat, every part of me on alert. The cafe buzzed with the usual hum of business chatter, but beneath it there was a tension I couldn't shake. When the door opened, I looked up, and for a split second, my heart skipped. The woman who walked in wasn't anyone I knew personally, but I recognized her immediately. She was tall, with a confident air, dressed in corporate chic, a woman who looked like she belonged in any boardroom. Sophia Pierce, daughter of the CEO of Sterling and Company. I didn't make the connection at first. Why would she be here, meeting me, of all people? But as she sat down across from me, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her voice was calm, controlled, yet there was an underlying current of urgency. "We need to talk," she said, sliding a file across the table. "I'm not your enemy, Jonathan, but we need to work together to stop what's happening inside Sterling." Her words were like a cold punch to the gut. It didn't make sense. Why would she, an heir to the company, be reaching out to me, the man who had been fired, humiliated, left to rot? I opened the file she handed me. Inside were more records, more evidence of corruption. But there was something else, notes, scribbled in the margins, personal insights, disconnected but clear. Whoever had written them knew the company inside out, knew the players, the moves, the lies. It was an inside job, and I was no longer alone in this fight. Sophia leaned in, her gaze sharp. "I know you want to burn them to the ground, Jonathan. But what you don't understand is that this isn't just a corporate sabotage. It's personal. I'm not here to play the game by their rules anymore. I'm going to make them pay for what they did to you and to my father." My stomach churned. The stakes had just been raised to a level I hadn't anticipated. I was no longer just dealing with the executives who had fired me. Now, I was entangled with a woman who had her own vendetta, her own reasons for destroying the very institution that had been her legacy. Was I being used? Was she manipulating me, playing me into a corner where I'd do the dirty work while she sat back and claimed victory? Or was she a true ally, someone who understood the rot at the core of Sterling and Company and wanted to bring it all crashing down just as much as I did? I couldn't tell yet, but I knew one thing. This was no longer just about revenge. It was a dangerous game of shifting alliances, double crosses, and hidden agendas. If I was going to survive, I would have to play it smarter than ever. The conversation shifted, but I didn't hear the words. I was already thinking 2 steps ahead, calculating the risks. Sophia Pierce was no longer just an ally, she was a threat, an enigma. She had her own cards to play, and I had to figure out where I stood in her game. As I walked out of that cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I just met wasn't just a daughter seeking justice. No, she had her own agenda, and I was caught in the middle of it. The enemy within was no longer just a faceless corporate board, it was someone far closer than I'd ever imagined. The days following my meeting with Sophia Pierce were a blur of preparation, strategy, and paranoia. The air between us had been thick with tension, but as I reviewed the evidence she had shared with me, one thing became undeniable. She was determined to take down the same people I had once trusted. We had a common enemy, but could I truly trust her? Or was I just another pawn in her game? I couldn't afford to waste time second-guessing. The files she'd given me revealed a level of corruption I had never imagined. The embezzlement scheme I had initially uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, Sterling and Company had been manipulating stock prices, funneling clients' funds into secret accounts, and bribing government officials to keep their operation under wraps. It was the perfect storm of corporate malfeasance, and I had a front row seat to the chaos. Sophia's insistence that we work together weighed heavily on my mind. She was smart, resourceful, and had access to information that I couldn't possibly get on my own. But I couldn't shake the suspicion that she had her own reasons for wanting to destroy her father's empire. The woman had ambition, and ambition could be a dangerous thing. I knew I needed to tread carefully. If I was going to bring down the board and restore my name, I would need to outsmart them at every turn. That meant playing along with Sophia, at least for now, while keeping my cards close to my chest. The plan was simple in theory but dangerous in practice. We would gather the smoking guns, documents, recordings, any shred of evidence that would expose the executives for their crimes. Once we had everything, we would go public. The scandal would be so massive, so damaging, that the company would collapse under the weight of its own corruption. It would bring them down, and it would give me back the power I had lost. But there was a problem. The closer we got to our deadline, the more I realized that Sophia had her own agenda. She was meticulous, calculating. She didn't just want to take down her father's empire. She wanted control of it. She had made that clear, though she never said it outright. The way she spoke about restructuring the company, taking it in a new direction, I knew she saw herself at the top of that hierarchy. In the beginning, I thought we were on the same team, but now I couldn't be sure. Was she using me to expose her father's empire so she could take over? Or was this just another move in the complex game she had been playing long before I came into the picture? I had no choice but to play my part and act as if everything was aligned. If I showed my hand too soon, I would be the one caught in a trap, not her. But the stakes were high, and as much as I wanted to get my revenge, I wasn't about to be taken down by her ambition. If I had to outsmart her to win, I would. We set the trap. Sophia arranged for a high-level meeting with the company's board of directors. The location was discreet, an upscale hotel conference room that no one would suspect was the setting for a corporate bloodbath. We would present the evidence as if it were a routine audit, nothing more than a check-in. The key players would be there, the CEO, the CFO, the lead legal counsel, and the rest of the executives who had been involved in the embezzlement. All we had to do was get them to bite, get them to say something incriminating, and then we would expose them in front of the world. But as the days leading up to the meeting grew shorter, I started to notice subtle shifts in Sophia's behavior. Her conversations with me became more clipped, her promises of loyalty more distant. The stakes were too high now for her to allow anyone, least of all me, to get in her way. I began to question if I was being set up, or if I was the one about to be sacrificed for Sophia's grand plan. But I couldn't back out now. I was too deep in, too close to everything I had worked for. And it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth, reclaiming my legacy, and taking down the men who had destroyed everything I'd built. The night before the meeting, I made my move. Sophia was asleep, her mind already on the next phase of the plan. But I had been awake for hours, replaying every conversation, every detail. I accessed her computer when she stepped out of the room, and what I found made my blood run cold. There, in a hidden folder, was a new file. A file that wasn't just about the evidence I had uncovered. This one was about me. Sophia had been preparing for the possibility of me going rogue, of me exposing her as well as the executives. She had already mapped out her next moves, including framing me for the leak. If I tried to go public, she had made sure that the evidence would point directly to me. She'd set the perfect trap, one that would ensure my destruction and her rise to the top. I stared at the screen, a knot tightening in my stomach. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting Sterling and Company anymore. I was fighting Sophia Pierce, a woman who had outplayed me at every turn. The next day, we walked into that conference room, the trap set for the board members, but now the real game had begun. I wasn't just here for revenge. I was here to save myself. As I looked across the table at Sophia, I knew I had only one option left: turn the tables or be turned on. The air in the conference room was suffocating. Every breath felt heavy as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The executives from Sterling and Company sat around the polished, gleaming table, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their feet. I had always known they were corrupt, but I never imagined the depth of their treachery, or how easily they had discarded me in their quest for power. But today was different. Today, I was no longer the man they had tossed aside. Today, I was in control. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past few months was ready to be unveiled. Sophia was beside me, her eyes cold and calculating, her smile tight as she waited for the right moment to strike. I could feel her tension, but I kept my composure. She had no idea what was coming next. The presentation had begun like any other corporate meeting, with the usual pleasantries and promises of growth, expansion, and efficiency. But as I clicked through the slides showing evidence of fraudulent accounting, insider trading, and illegal kickbacks, I saw the change in their faces: confusion, disbelief, and then the unmistakable flicker of panic. They were trying to maintain their cool, but I could see the cracks forming in their facade. These were the men who had once made the decisions, held the reins, and now they were watching it all slip away. Then came the moment that would change everything. I had planned to reveal the full extent of their embezzlement scheme, to expose the full truth to the world. But as I was about to hit send on the press release that would go live immediately, something unexpected happened. The doors to the conference room opened, and in walked a familiar face, Simon, the head of legal counsel, carrying a stack of papers. Sophia's expression faltered, her mask slipping for the briefest of moments. I didn't need to be a genius to know something had gone horribly wrong. I had made sure my move would be unstoppable, but now it seemed I was the one caught off guard. Simon stood at the front of the room, his voice calm but dripping with authority. "Jonathan," he said, "I believe you've made a grave mistake." He turned toward the board members. "This entire meeting, every piece of evidence you've presented, is part of an elaborate scheme to destroy the company, and it's all based on falsified documents." The shock hit me like a cold wave. How could this be happening? Everything I had worked for, every move I'd made to expose them, was suddenly in question. My stomach churned as I realized what was happening. Sophia had flipped the script. She had anticipated my every move, and now she was framing me as the villain. She had fed Simon the same files I had received, but with a twist. The documents were altered, manipulated to make it look as though I had forged everything to bring down the company. The embezzlement, the kickbacks, the fraudulent transactions, they were now my responsibility. Sophia stood behind me, her face a perfect mask of innocence. "Jonathan, you've been such a valuable ally," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "But it seems you've let your personal vendetta cloud your judgment. I tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. Now, it's too late." The room erupted into chaos as the board members began shouting, pointing fingers, and demanding answers. I could feel the walls closing in on me. I had been played, and the consequences were far worse than I had imagined. The pieces I thought I controlled were slipping through my fingers. Sophia had turned everything against me. The once innocent files were now evidence of my treason, and the public would believe her version of events. The scandal I had orchestrated would be nothing but a smear campaign against my name. The company would survive, the executives would remain untouched, and I would be left with nothing. But there was one thing Sophia hadn't anticipated. I was always a step ahead. As the meeting escalated, I realized my only choice was to go public before they could destroy me completely. I had no other option but to release everything, every detail, every piece of evidence I had uncovered. The truth had to come out, even if it meant bringing down everything I had built. Even if it meant my career was over, I couldn't let them win. With a swift motion, I clicked the button to release the press release. The world would know the truth about Sterling and Company, the corruption, the embezzlement, and the people responsible for it. I would be discredited, yes, but they would be the ones to fall. But in that instant, a new message popped up on my screen. It was from an anonymous sender, and it contained one sentence: "You're not done yet." Before I could process what it meant, the door to the conference room slammed open again, and a group of law enforcement agents stormed in, their eyes locked on me. I froze. Had I miscalculated? Was I about to be arrested for everything I had done? But then Simon, who had been orchestrating this entire thing, smiled. "Jonathan, you've been accused of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You've been under investigation for months. But now that we have you in the spotlight, we can finalize the charges. This is the end for you." And just like that, everything I had fought for came crashing down. The charges were real. The evidence was real, except for one thing. I hadn't forged a single document. Sophia had framed me, yes, but the truth I had uncovered couldn't be buried. She had manipulated everything to make me the fall guy. But I had made sure there was a trail she couldn't erase. Faced with the very real threat of criminal charges and a life destroyed, I had one final card to play. I made a secret deal. My name, my legacy, everything I had worked for was at risk. But the deal was simple. I would vanish. I would leave behind the world I had known and disappear, leaving behind a small fortune and a chance to rebuild in the shadows. The world would think I had crumbled, that I had been broken. But what they didn't know was that I had faked my downfall. I had set up everything from the beginning to disappear into the night. No one would know the truth except for me. I was starting over, this time on my own terms. Months passed, and the scandal surrounding Sterling and Company exploded. The company was in turmoil, the executives were arrested, and Sophia's rise to power became the final act in her twisted game. But as the dust settled, I re-emerged, not as Jonathan the Fallen, but as Jonathan the Conqueror. I built a global empire, from the ground up, a company with integrity, honesty, and power that no one could touch. And this time, no one would take it from me. The world had written me off, but I had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever. Sophia thought she had won, but in the end it was me who had the last laugh.